This is the lion's oak that we talked about in the classroom, and it was cut down back in the 1970s. We have to explain to the school kids all the time that this tree didn't grow here. That's a good concept. This was a stump that was part of the tree that was cut down on Lyons Avenue, and we have somebody counted the tree rings, and they say there's 147 tree rings. So this tree was 147 years old when it was cut down. Within the past year, we had one of our docents who's a carpenter. He put a new finish on it, sort of to polish it out. It's starting to wear off. We're going to have to get that redone. It was damaged in the 2004 foothill fire. This chunk here was burnt out. But that's a good interpretive thing too, because we get to tell the kids about the fire. A lot of these trees were singed. This was singed, but everything came back, and you can barely tell any of the fire damage now.
Was that the fire with the hawk that got electrocuted and fell down?
That's correct.
The electrical wires? Yeah.
That's correct. It was a red-tailed hawk, supposedly over closer to the Newhall Pass, that was electrocuted, and its burning body fell down into the dry grass, and the wind blew it this way, and there was over, 6,000 acres that were burned. And we were very lucky. The firefighters really used this as a staging area, and they saved our building. In the day, we didn't have that nice fireproof roof. It was an old shake roof from the 1970s, that brittle wood, and they saved everything here. And I've got some film on it if you guys want to come back for maybe I'll do a fire show.
I think so.
We've got, I only showed you 3 parts of that fire movie last night. We've got 2 other parts to show.
Deb, you know who Deb is?
Deb Walt?
In the office, she says one time this whole place burned down, it had to be redone entirely. You know, he said the canyon was burnt up, I think is what she said.
Well, yeah, there's been many fires. In 1979, there was a huge fire. It threatened the building. But as far as I know, the building was built in 71, and this current building was never burned down. So, but there have been, you're right, many fires through this area. So, Lyons Oak, this is the first stop on our history trail. The next stop will be our historic Walker cabin. Just get cozy. We're all friends, you know. I took a bath this morning. So this is our historic Walker cabin. We think it was built sometime before 1920 by Mr. Walker. He handcrafted all of these structures. Very small, and one of the things that we always like to talk about is the Walker family was quite big. 7 boys, 5 girls, 2 adults, 14 people. Now we don't know if they all lived in this cabin all at once. There's some discussion about that. But still, it was a large family living in a little house. Now this house has been changed over the years. The porch that you walked under, that wasn't there originally. The shingles on the roof weren't there originally, it was just tar paper. And we think there were some small rooms out in the back. There's some little foundations out there. And we don't know exactly if the kitchen was here or if it was outside. So we have a docent that's looking into these issues with the Walker family. And so we're trying to, put more of the pieces together. But the Walkers lived a fairly primitive lifestyle. And one of the things we like to point out, do you see any electric lights above us here? No. You see, a telephone? No. You see any high-speed internet? No, we didn't have any of that stuff. This is a pretty primitive lifestyle. They lived sort of a little house on the prairie lifestyle in the 1920s. They lived a sort of a 1870s lifestyle in the 1920s, because the town of Newhall, when they lived here, they had phones and electricity and stuff like that. Now, one piece of equipment that we put in here just recently to kind of indicate that the Walkers were a little bit more sophisticated than just, dirt farmers is this old typewriter. It's come to light recently. We've got a lot of papers that the Walker family has donated to us, and Mr. Walker was quite the businessman. A lot of deals with oil companies, with mining, commercial ventures, with the film industry, kept journals of how much he'd charge to rent this place out to usually $15 to $20 a day for filming and associated services. So we got this old typewriter and we put it in here just to kind of remind us that Mr. Walker was quite sophisticated. And we are going to put a display board up here with some of his documents and some of the legal stuff that he was involved in. Most of this stuff in here, this is not original furnishings. This is stuff that was brought in here from garage sales and antique stores and whatever by the docents and volunteers over the years to kind of make it look like what it might have looked when the Walkers were here. We have several stories that we like to tell. One of the stories is about these tubs here. And the story goes that Melba, one of the Walker children, is that Mrs. Walker would give all of the children a bath on Saturday night. So they'd be nice and fresh and clean when they'd go to church on Sunday morning. So what she'd do is they had a pump out in the front there. She'd pump up some water and then heat it up on the old stove back here and then get a nice, warm bath. And then she'd grab the kids, usually starting, we think, with the little ones. She'd grab them and scrub them up, and next, grab them up, scrub them up. And the story that Melba tells that, maybe they didn't change the water. All of the 12 kids got the same bath. So again, this is one of the stories that we've heard. But it's fun to talk to the kids about it because they had a primitive lifestyle, and they didn't have a bathroom. The bathroom they had an outhouse, we think, over in the back there. So kind of a primitive lifestyle. Some of the stuff we brought in, here's an old toy that they might have had. Then, how they wash their clothes. This is something that, you guys have seen these old ringers and things of that sort. This thing here, I thought was sort of an ice box, and it's got these little containers, and it looks like this. So you put these things in here. Well, yeah, what we think, or what we were told, somebody identified this as sort of a primitive crock pot. You'd sort of heat up, there's a stone on the bottom, you heat up these stones, and you'd put your food in there, and then you'd put it down there, close it up, and there's your crock pot, circa 19 whatever. The only original furnishing that we know that is in this cabin is that table behind us here. This table was actually built by Mr. Walker, and it survives. And somewhere in there, one of the Walker kids carved his initials, and I don't have my flashlight with me. Or maybe I do. It's hard to see, but there's a CW right here. And supposedly, I think it was Charles Walker, one of the Walker kids, carved his name in there.
ZW.
It looks like ZW, but it's supposed to be CW.
Yeah. It's an E.
Yeah. Oh, it's E. Maybe it was Edward. That doesn't look circa 1930s to me, but that's what somebody said. So, again, history is a set of lies. Agreed. Again, this is a bed that, it wasn't the original thing, but the bed with the ropes, we do tell a story about this. These ropes had to be tightened up occasionally to keep this. They didn't have a box spring mattress, so this would sort of sag down. So they had to tighten up these ropes, and supposedly that's the origin of that sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. You had to tighten up the bed, to tighten it up so you had sleep tight to get a better night's sleep. We're in the process again of trying to clean this up and refurbish some of this stuff, but this is it. This is the original size of the cabin. The configuration I can't guarantee because there's been a lot of changes through the years with the movies. But this is what the original size of the cabin was. Quite small. So they eventually outgrew this, and by the mid-1920s, they were probably living full-time up at what we call the Walker Ranch area in that larger house. And then this house was leased out to the movie companies, such as, I told you about that movie, The Hard Hombre, and there's other ones too, that you can see this cabin in the movies. And also this was actually we talked about the Adventures of Spin and Marty. There was a episode of Spin and Marty that was filmed here, and this was a haunted cabin, and Spin and Marty somehow got involved with this, and we had a gentleman that was studying, doing the whole history of the Adventures of Spin and Marty, and trying to find every set, where every scene was filmed, and that was quite an experience. He's got a website. It's called of Cinch and Saddle. You can Google that, and he's got scripts from the Walt Disney scripts from the 1950s. Production notes, photos. It's quite an interesting project. He was a disabled vet, and this is the way he kept himself, while he was recuperating, kept himself entertained. So this is the Walker cabin. I heard somebody mention they want to know about the Walker children. Do they like living here? And you hear different stories. I mean, this is why I say it's interesting doing this kind of local history, oral history. Some of the Walker children have fond memories of growing up in the canyon. They thought it was fun, and some of them don't. And what my theory is that some of the older children, the children that were born first, when families first start out, they don't have a whole lot of money, And you know, it's kind of hard. I mean, they struggled when the Walkers first, you know, moved up here and the first kids were born. You know, it was kind of tough. Life was tough. They didn't have a lot of money. They were feeling their way around here. And then as time went on, and you know, Mr. Walker, the Walker family gained more assets and got more wealthy. The later kids, we think, had a better life, and they don't remember life being so hard here. It was like, yeah, we lived there. That was fun. And so, you know, I think it depends. What was your birth order? The early kids, yeah, and then, you know, the older kids always have to take care of the younger kids in big families. So it was probably a tougher life for some of the older kids because they were sort of like the surrogate parents. And Mrs. Walker, you know, she died relatively young in 1930. And some of the older kids, they really had to pitch in and help raise the younger kids. So yeah, it depends on who you talk to. I know Melba Walker is one of the younger kids, the one that's still alive. She talks about, yeah, you know, my dad was really sort of tight with the money, and we only got one pair of shoes a year, and when we got home from school, we had to take our shoes off and just, you know, walk around the area here without our shoes. And for Christmas, you know, we got maybe an orange and a little toy or something, and it was a tough life. Whereas some of the older kids, yeah, not so tough. So again, it depends on who you talk to.
Now, did they travel through the past? What do they call that? It start with a B, the past that they
Beals
came
Cut?
through? Beals Cut?
No, Beals Cut, that was more, you know, that was prior. I mean, by the time the Walkers, there was roads coming up through the San Fernando Valley. The Newhall Pass was open. There was a tunnel that went through the mountains here, and you know, so it was, you know, the access was better. Beals Cut was more in the, you know, the 1800s. Well, I guess it did go up into the early 1900s, but that wasn't an issue for them. What was an issue, the Placerita Canyon Road wasn't this nice big paved road we have now. That was built in 1949, 1950. It was a series of sort of dirt roads that came up here through the canyon, so it was, the access, yeah, wasn't that great. We didn't have that nice paved road.
They didn't have really any outsiders, pretty much. That's
Yeah, not too much. There's stories, you know, one of the stories that made the cut in some of the writings we have regarding the Walker family is that Mr. Walker, he made moonshine. And one time he was driving to LA with a load of moonshine. He got caught, and they had to bail him out of jail. But one of the stories they tell is the kids, when he was making moonshine, they'd line up and down the canyon, and they'd have a series of whistles, and they'd like if the what do you call it, the revenuers were coming up the canyon, they'd all, you know, they'd whistle. Again, some of the families disputes that. They say no, that never happened. But some of the family sides say, oh, yeah, that happened. So we do know that Mr. Walker's father-in-law, Mr. Renier, who owned the property over in Sand Canyon, he did grow grapes for wine. And the story they tell is the wine that was kind of not too good, they'd give it to Frank Walker, and he'd you know, cook it up and make you know, distill it and make moonshine out of it. So anyway, so let's continue on down, and we'll do one more stop. This is our historic oil equipment. This is a Gould pump. It's still got the original nameplate on it here, and this was a pump that they say was used to pump the oil from the wellhead to the refinery. Now this wasn't the original placement of it, okay? This is just a little display we made. The rolling rock surface drill bit is over here, and then that's the production packer, which is sort of like a pressure device for the oil well. And then this over here, this is different types of oil equipment called sucker rod holders. There's a pipe threader and some other equipment in there. Again, just to remind us of the old days, oil production was never that big of a deal in Placerita Canyon. Again, we had, you know, 2.5 barrels, 4 barrels a day. I mean, that's not, you know, that productive. But since it was here and it's still up there, the capped off oil wells and stuff, we decided to, you know, keep this equipment here. Oak of the Golden Dream, I'm sure many of you have been here. This is what the oak that the state of California acknowledges that Mr. Francisco Lopez had his dream of the gold. And we have a couple of plaques here that are sort of interesting. Let's take a look at this one. I always found this intriguing. We have a plaque here. This is the one from the state of California. California Registered Historical Landmark number 168. And down at the bottom, it's always intrigued me. It says first registered March 6, 1935. Plaque placed by the state of California. in cooperation with Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society and Platrix Chapter Number 2, E. clampus vitus. You know, does anybody know what that is? Yeah, I looked it up. It's still around, and it's hard to describe, but it's an organization that tries to preserve and protect the history of gold discoveries or mineral discoveries, and it sounds like kind of it's an interesting organization. I really need to do some more reading on it, but I was wondering what it was. But it is a historical group that tries to preserve and protect the history of mining and gold mining. So we have that plaque, and then if you move over here, we have another plaque.
Can't find that app.
And this one was put in by the Santa Clarita Valley Association of Realtors. And this one, we had some controversy. A few years ago, we had Mr. Bob Lopez, who is a distant relative of Mr. Francisco Lopez, who did a talk over at the Historical Society. And actually, I videotaped that one. And he was kind of critical of this plaque here because it talks about Francisco Lopez y Arbello. He says that's the wrong Francisco Lopez. And he had some other information. And I never really pursued that. But I still have the DVD. One of these days I'll have to watch that. But anyway, he was a little bit critical of this plaque that the realtors put in. The story, now there's been some interesting follow-ups on this. There's a video that we have of Melba Walker, and she's pointing to an area over here as to where the gold was actually discovered. And then there was a video done by, I don't know who it was exactly done by, but it was called Rio Santa Clara. And I got a copy of that from Pat Salatori over at the Historical Society. And it's sort of interesting. It was done probably back in the 50s. And it has, you guys remember Monty Montana?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was sort of a local celebrity. It was somebody related to him, a young woman on a horse, and she's touring different historical sites in the Santa Clarita Valley. Anyway, she ties her horse up here, and she's talking about the Oak of the Golden Dream, and the horse starts munching on the oak tree. And one of our docents saw that. Get that horse away from that tree. You know. This tree did have some problems back in the 70s and 80s, so we thought we were going to lose it. The docents actually hired an arborist who came out and studied it, and they thought there was some sort of disease or some sort of problems with it, but it survived, and it's still here. And I was trying to find that report several months ago. I still haven't found it, but yeah, this tree, if you believe the story about Francisco Lopez and the dating, this tree's got to be, well over 250 years old. So it's an old oak tree. People have asked me how long do coast live oaks live, and I don't have a definitive answer. I would say hundreds of years. Count the tree rings, but then you don't want to cut down a tree and count the trees, unless you're the county road department. But so this is our Oak of the Golden Dream. We had reenactment ceremonies we've done here for a couple of years. We haven't done it. Haven't done it the last couple of years, but we did it for 2009, 2010, I think. We had some reenactors come in here and tell the story of the gold to the school kids. So, any questions about the Oak of the Golden Dream?
You said you had the arborist in at one time. Like, do they come and, trim it or do anything to keep it healthy?
Generally not. Now the county, the county Parks Department has a tree crew. And if there's a branch that's overhanging or a branch that's just dropping off, they'll come in and, get rid of any hazards. But generally they don't, unless the tree's showing symptoms. And since that time, I guess it hasn't shown any symptoms of problems. Now, we did almost actually lose part of this tree to a car. 4 years ago, a car came off Placerita Canyon Road, a high rate of speed, crashed through the fence, almost ran into the tree, missed the tree for about 6-8 inches, ended up against this back pole here, and the car was just all messed up. The guy that was driving the car, we think had a little bit too much to drink. He fled the scene. They eventually caught up with him, but they pulled the car out. But it was funny, for months we were pulling car shrapnel out of the tree, out of the wash there, out of some of the channels. In fact, the kids on our tours, they'd pick up stuff, and "Mister, what's this?" It'd be a taillight, So yeah, the poor tree, it's had its threats: cars, bugs, disease, fires, but it's still here. Okay, well, that sort of ends our little tour, and I say you're welcome to come back anytime and ask questions.